Well, I have a great interview for you today. Subi Ghosh from Stream Companies is here to talk about not just leadership, but her journey, how her career path has evolved, but more importantly, what happened during the times where she didn't see where she was going? How did she identify the skill sets? What was important to her in order that she could surround herself with the right mentors, put herself in the right position to be able to achieve what she and her team are trying to achieve? Well, a lot to unpack there. Really exciting interview. I can't wait for you to share it. So let's dive in and get into today's episode. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge, Now What? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And the key to this channel, as you know, is to help those of you that find yourself now in charge of a team, a project, or even a business, build the skills necessary to lead high-performing teams. Each week, we focus on just one strategy, either myself or, like today, with our guest, to give you tips and strategies that have helped us build our businesses so you can generate consistent results. Now, if you're new to the channel, or even if you've returned but you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Each week you'll get alerted to the new videos I put out. And as always, please share it. There's a lot of people who need this help. And let me hear in the comments what you like, what you don't like, or if there's a new topic you'd like to talk about. So that out of the way, as I said in the intro, this is one of my favorite people that I get to spend time with. She is just an incredible spirit. She is wicked smart, but more importantly, she just has a great take on people. And that's why I wanted to have her on here. So without further ado, Subi Ghosh, how are you? Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me and for that wonderful introduction. I'm so honored that you feel that way about me.
Yeah, no, it's fun because every time we chat, it's just time just flies. We have similar perspectives on certain things. And as I said, you're deceptive because you come across as a very low-key, easygoing person. But underneath that, if people should not take that for granted, and that's a good tip. We'll talk about that in leadership, is that, what you talk about in your actions just, show a whole different side. So anyway, before that, why don't you give the audience a quick 30 seconds, who you are, a little bit about your history, and then we'll jump right in.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Subi Ghosh. I am the Vice President of Marketing and OEM Relations at Stream Companies, which is a large Tier 3 agency. We are a full service, fully integrated, tech-enabled ad agency. And I'm really proud of my role, of what I do. I enjoy what I do every day. My unique hat allows me to work with corporate relationships, with marketing, and with sales. And as I'm sure we're going to touch on within the leadership conversation, I love wearing many hats. And I think that has led to my career arc over the last 10 years, which I never saw coming. I just got these random opportunities and turned that into something. And so now I try to coach people and help people, because I think a lot of times people feel that the door is just kind of, either the door can be open for you or they just don't exist. And I'm here to kind of share a little bit about my career path of sometimes you can create a door where none exists. And that's pretty much, in a nutshell, my entire career, just creating doors and doing my best to walk through them.
Well, that's a great thing. I was writing down a couple notes because I like that. So that's a great place to start, because I think there's a lot of people who, especially when you're starting out, or, either you're on a team and you want to get to that point where I want to get to that next step and I want to lead, or maybe you just got promoted. And, in previous interviews, I was just talking with Troy Spring about this the other day on an interview where he said, sometimes people are good at what they do and then they get promoted to do that, but they start focusing because they don't know, no one took time to teach them how to lead. They default back to watching what the people were doing, their old job, and they try to micromanage that. But to your point is, I really want to dig a little more into this, where you were saying over your time, things just evolved or opportunities happen. So how should people look at that? Is it a planned strategy where you can set it up and say, I want to get there, and look for mentors to help you get there? Or sometimes is it just the fact that if I work hard enough, just being aware of some potential opportunities may take me in a different direction? What do you see about that?
So I think you touched on a lot of things that are really exciting to kind of dive into. I think there are two mistakes being made as individuals and as employers, not because they know any better, but it's because it's how we've been taught to think for ages, right? So one thing is, just because someone is really good in their role doesn't mean that the next step for their career is management. And that thought process is one that we both, as as employees, looking at what our career path should look like, and as employers looking at, what the career path should be like for our organization, we need to both, really make that an actual effort to navigate those things, because sometimes a person can be really, really good at certain tasks or responsibilities. But just because someone's really good at those tasks and responsibilities does not mean that they would be a good manager to oversee people working on those tasks and responsibilities.
Do you think, let me just pause you there. Do you think that maybe someone, because that's an interesting thing, because, as a manager of a whole team, there's a lot of other skill sets that, again, if I'm an employer or I'm looking to fill that role, there's a lot of different skill sets, but maybe an option for that person is maybe they're a trainer. Right? They don't have to go run the whole team, but I can go in and teach somebody to do what I do, but they like that piece of running the team, but they don't like, I have to sit in reports and sit in meetings, and that's in their mind the boring part of it. And so they're not good at that. But I think, to your point, is we as employers have to really understand that that's a whole, there's a lot in that role, and maybe somebody isn't that good. So it isn't always a logical step of, well, if you're good, then the next step is management. Maybe there's something else.
So I guess the advice is twofold. If you're on the employer side, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give is to, right now, when we're looking for someone to fill a hole, when we put out employment ads, we base it on responsibility. What we need to do when we're evaluating those applications and those human beings is boil that even further down to skill sets rather than just bullet points of responsibility. So what kind of skill set and different skills do I need from the person that needs to fill that hole? Do I need someone that, can coach people and train people? Because that's not necessarily always what people perceive to be management. Is there a lot of organization and documentation involved? If that person's not really detail oriented, maybe that's not a right fit. And then the other thing is break out of it, both on the employee side and the employer side. If there's a hole that needs to be filled, and I've done this for myself, instead of finding the job title or the role that they previously have, create a new one. It doesn't have to change in pay. It doesn't have to change a lot of major things for the organization, but just say, okay, so now, like you mentioned, maybe there is a trainer, maybe there is a more administrative, documentation-based role. Typically, there are multiple roles that we can kind of separate out into that can help a team function a lot more effective and efficient.
See, I like that. And that's that I think is a really great observation for those of you who are listening. Little we'd like to talk about tools for your toolbox. That's a really interesting observation, in the fact that many times as employers, we try to find one person that can handle multiple roles. And more importantly, then we're willing to allow them to be successful in one half of their job and really mediocre in the other half. And either that's frustrating for us as employers because we keep trying to make them better at something they're really not good at. And they're not happy about that either. Where if you are looking more at what the the responsibilities are, because I think you need that. I think one of the issues that I've seen is when you're hiring, you just go after a title, like you said, but the title for, let's just use one, account manager or whatever, performance manager, whatever, whoever handles your clients in Stream, the responsibilities are different than what that would be in my company, part because of size, part because of just structure internally. But if I'm hiring and saying account management, if I don't diligently know what I need that person to do in my company, then I'm going to hire wrong. But I love that fact of splitting duties where you can sit there and break it. I like that concept of break it, because then I can say, you know what? I need a trainer. And then I need somebody more administrative. Because very rarely you're going to find both of them, one person to do both.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think that if I have to break things down into multiple roles, then I'm paying more. A lot of times what we can do is take a look at the structures we already have and re-envision what that means to delegate accordingly to not only their skill sets of traits of human traits are like, if someone has a little bit more empathy on your team, maybe that's the person that has more of the customer service aspect to it. But because there's three sets of skills. There's your technical skills, there's your human skills, and then there's your conceptual skills that are like, can they work with other people?
Right.
Versus your technical skills that are more proficiencies, and then your human skills, which are, people skills, et cetera. And I think that a lot of times we try to merge it all together. And I'm building a brand new team at Stream, and I'm really, really thankful for something that I learned at Stream, which is it's an entrepreneurial environment. I never really heard of that before until I came to Stream.
So what does that mean?
So essentially, it's like you're a business within the business.
Correct.
So if you create ideas and solutions for your clients or for the company, you're allowed to pitch those and run with it. If you're capable of adding that onto your responsibility list and running with it, then you are given the opportunity to own it. So right now, I have gotten myself into a little bit of a pickle where I have quite a few of them that I don't want to let go.
Right.
But that entrepreneurial environment allows me to be that business within the business. And so I've now been given the green light to build this team. And we're building it through COVID. So we obviously can't hire as much as we want and scale as much as we want, as quickly as we want. So I adopted this great concept that I read about, and it's a team-based approach. So what I do is, okay, I have 3 people for this specific project. So instead of trying to get one person that can do all of it, what we then do is have each person with their actual roles and their titles that have those specific responsibilities. But then they say, okay, hey, Steve, you're really, really good at this technical thing. So I'm going to ask for you to take that. What can I take off of your plate? Because I'm really good at this, which then allows the entire team to be more efficient. So you don't necessarily have to rewrite roles either. You can just have your team identify those skills and techniques to be able to be more efficient as a team. There's a lot of different solutions.
Yeah, and I like that. And it is, that takes leadership to explain that, because people like their titles. There are people that like, this is what I do, and they don't like change. So if you're taking things away, people get fearful of, well, if you're taking this away, is something going to happen to me? Don't you trust me? But what I like is the reshuffling of the reallocating of all the skills. And even going back to our, a couple minutes ago where we were saying, maybe I need a trainer, maybe I need someone else. Well, maybe you can accommodate that by, if you get someone to run the team and they have 80% of it, but maybe you promote somebody from within to say, well, would you help with the training?
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's the reallocating of resources to solve the problem versus always thinking I have to bring in more. I think there's so many times that a good leader, when a challenge comes up, how can we handle this internally? How can we reallocate resources? Because oftentimes we get stuck in ruts and it becomes factory mentality. And especially for companies like ours, where we are dealing with marketing and we're dealing with the ebb and flow of monthly sales and things of that nature, you can have a structure, you can have a process, but this isn't widgets. This isn't
Yeah.
building widgets. And so it has to have some of that flexibility, both from the employer standpoint or the leader standpoint and the team standpoint in order to solve a problem.
It's a great point. Just to hit on the fear concept. I do think that people are fearful of letting go of certain responsibilities. I'm a big believer in breaking the concept of hoarding responsibilities
I
a
like
lot,
that.
but it really comes down to identifying the root of the cause, right? The root of the issue.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's because people feel like, oh, they're not going to see me as value. So
It's true.
giving them the authority and saying, hey, if you think that there is something that somebody else can do faster to help your task get done better and faster, I'm giving you that authority to make that decision and delegate to a teammate and then take something off of their plate. When they have that kind of control, and then another thing I learned from Stream is it's a thank you environment. From all the way to the top to the bottom, we're constantly thanking each other. We're constantly allowing people to raise their hand and not be punished for raising their hand. And it's incredible what results you'll get when people don't function out of fear and they function out of, efficiencies.
Right. And that comes from, I've met the leaders of Stream as well, but that's a difference in a lot of companies. But that also comes from either, you as a leader being taught that way, you as a leader investing time to learn that way, because there are defaults of, well, I was trained this way, so that's the way I'm going to do it. I like the team-based approach. We follow very similar in that we're constantly looking to tweak what we'll call bandwidth and adjust. But it is this team effort. But it is that's just a personality type also of being, I like safe, I like controlled, I like ritual. And, I think that's one of the main flaws of managers who are unsuccessful, is they think that if I'm not doing anything, or if I am delegate too much, someone's going to turn around and say, well, why do I need Glenn? I could get rid of Glenn, versus the mentality of, if I duplicate myself, then I can go do more. I have time. And I think that's one of the key components of successful leaders, is they're always trying to replace themselves. They're always trying to make a manager one time of mine always said, your job is to make your job, meaning you, obsolete, which means that you've trained someone else so well that now I can go do something else. I can do more, because they're never going to promote you to go do something else if your current responsibilities crash and burn as soon as you leave.
Yeah.
But that takes an environment to feel that safety of, we want you here. We want you to do more. I'm waiting for you, Subi, can you hustle? I got more for you to do, right? I got more on my list that I can use you for, but you got to get this fixed first.
It's also the individual's mindset. Like,
sure.
Getting out of your own way is such a big mind shift. So even if you're in that environment, I'll be honest, when I first came to Stream, I was kind of in my own head based off of my previous experiences at other organizations of, needing to show my worth in X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And even when you're in a good environment, sometimes we carry that toxicity, or what some people refer to as employment PTSD, where we carry the burdens of the things that we've experienced. So we try to apply everything from our previous experiences. And so I think it's a mind shift of understanding what the environment is and allowing yourself to navigate those channels and allow yourself to say, okay, I'm going to be judged not on my performance if you're in management, but on the performance of your team. How do I best make them succeed to then make the department succeed, or the team succeed, or whatever. I think it's a big mindset issue.
So then let's talk about that, because you touched on two things there that have been a recurring theme through a lot of these interviews. One is, a successful leader. I always say, once you're in charge, it's no longer about you, it's about them, meaning it's the team. We have to succeed. Everybody has a role to do. I have my job to do, and the pieces all fit together. But interesting, the whole TD, but it's more about how I want to take it in a different direction. How do you, as a leader, check yourself so that you're not falling into a rut, you're not just going through the paces anymore? How do you stay sharp? For you personally, do you have a team of people? I mean, do you have people around you who you trust to go, you're not doing what you need to do?
Yeah.
How do you stay sharp in that so you don't fall into a redundancy or a rut?
Yeah. I think the first lesson that I've ever learned was that I need to get to know myself and what I want.
Right.
I think, like we talked about, sometimes we have these ideas in our head of what our career path needs to be, and we don't understand what those roles are, which is why so many kids change majors so much in college. Once they actually see it, they're like, I don't know, that's not for me.
Right.
But I think the bigger mistake and the hardest lesson to learn is fighting to get a certain role and then realizing it's not for you, especially if it takes a big chunk of your, career timeline. So for me, I learned some valuable lessons at my last employment. It was a great opportunity, but I realized that it wasn't for me just now to be the person at the top making all the decisions. I realized that I needed to be surrounded by a team. I needed to have a collaborative approach, and I needed a significant number of people above me that I can learn and absorb. I'm not ready in this place in my life. And I think also we're seeing all like the hustle, you got to grind, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And we allow other people to define what it means to be successful. So learning myself, identifying what I wanted for myself, where I thrived, how I thrived, and then again, surrounding myself both inside the organization to have a champion for myself that I can reach out to and say, they may be your boss, they may be somebody else, to say, what can I do to be better? What am I doing that maybe isn't the best way to do it? And then also outside of your organization, getting those mentors and champions outside that can be a little bit more direct with you than a professional environment.
Right.
So those are things that I actively pursue that help keep me grounded. And my boss, actually, I was kind of in my own way about some things, and there was so much opportunity in front of me, but I was like asking for permission for everything because that's what I was taught in the last, my entire career.
Right.
And he's like, this is an entrepreneurial environment. If you see something that you need to do, you need to do it. And he was so blunt with me. You are in your own way. You are the reason you can't seem to succeed. It's because you need all of these types of things. And I think you need that. You need to not be hurt by that, absorb it, and identify a plan moving forward. And it totally changed my career.
I think that's great. And I could not agree more. I mean, we've touched on a couple in some previous episodes on mentors, having mentors who are, or surrounding yourself with a group of people you can lean on and reach out to for advice, but also who are going to tell you straight up, you're not doing something or you are doing something. But I really love that concept of understanding what is good for you at this time. It's going to evolve. I mean, absolutely. I remember years, I think before I joined, my brother to here, I had my own company, but I was with a company for a long time, and I left and I lost my way a little bit because I didn't really have an anchor of what I was good at. And my wife was the one who said to me, forget everything. What do you like to do? And I said, well, this. She goes, start there. Yeah. And she was somebody who said, you need people around you. You need a team to manage. You need bodies. Yeah. You working at home by yourself is not, you're not going to be good that way. Now, here we are, I'm working remote, but I still have a team. And I know that about me. That's a better skill for me. And I think to your point is sometimes you devalue or you don't. And I think we'll circle all the way back to the beginning where you said, I don't see the path. Because if you say to yourself, well, I like coaching teams, and you're looking at the current management of your businesses and that doesn't look like
Right.
what you like to do. And you're going, well, I guess I'll never be in charge. I'll never
Yeah.
be able to do that. But then what happens is over time, you either get a little bit better, but more importantly, you may end up in a company where you are now, where that is the way that they function.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you go, oh, I can do what I want. And I also have a path. So I think that is something for new, younger, and just even new men. Don't worry where, if you really understand what makes you tick, eventually that opportunity will come.
Yes. And the other thing I would say is, yeah, I'm very lucky for the environment that I'm in today, but I
Right.
didn't always have that. I actually started in retail, in automotive, where there wasn't a lot of structure. And
Right.
so I think especially the younger generations, we're not as creative when it comes to employment. We kind of, I feel like if there's a door open, great. Otherwise, I'm just going to do my job. Or there's a lot of different nuances to millennials and Gen Z.
Right.
What I would advise is don't wait for someone to present you an opportunity, and or wait for the title or wait for the pay. If you see an opening where you can identify and solve a problem to show your worth and how you can do it better, get the permission to do those specific tasks. And almost every leader is going to be like, well, you're going to do that for free. You're going to do that on your own. Sure. So don't wait for the big opportunity and the angels to sing. Instead, seek out the opportunities where you can shine.
Yes.
In every single one of my, I guess, the last 3 or 4 jobs I've had, I've created roles in every single one of them.
Right.
You don't have to wait for leadership to do that. You can be a leader and not be in management. Leadership
Right.
is not specifically about management. So if you want to be a leader and rally the troops and find opportunities where you can create solutions for the organization, they'll typically give it to you. And then the title and the salary and all that stuff can come following that.
Yeah. And I think that, I've been asked, I've talked to high school students and college students, and I've talked to even people in job transition, and they say, what are things that you look for? And I say, really, one of the biggest things I look for is work ethic. I want somebody who wants to work, who's not looking at the clock, who's at least I want to surround myself with people, not that they have to work 24/7. That's my job because I own the company.
Yeah.
But when a project arises or a need arises, I don't want someone going, oh, well, it's 5 o'clock, I have to leave. It's the client first. But I think to your point is everybody needs to be thinking about how can we help the team? If
Yes.
whatever company you're working for, even if you say this is not where I want to be forever, your job while you're there is to say, how can I help the company do better? How can I have jobs to do and understand how that, now again, if you don't understand how your role impacts the whole, then ask that question. But the key is every day, I have to come in and give it my effort. To your point is sometimes you're going to take on roles. Sometimes you're going to ask for roles and maybe there isn't pay. You're not worried. You shouldn't be worried about always for that because again, it's an investment in your skill set, investment in yourself that may pay off later because you'll look back and say, I can look back at tons of jobs I worked in and I look back and I say, boy, I didn't make a lot of money, or man, I worked all those hours and I don't feel like I got X, Y, Z. But yet all the other skills that I learned now that benefit me now, that allow me to accelerate my company now, you don't see it sometimes. So to your point is always, you should be focused on how can I learn more? How can I get more out of this opportunity that here, as I said, you may not be there forever, but how can I really suck out all of the knowledge that I can and experience out of whatever job I am? I don't care if it's delivering pizzas. I don't care if it's working in a restaurant. I don't care where it is. There's so much that you can learn if you're willing to open your eyes. And then that's what stands out to leaders later on to offer you opportunities, because what they see is your willingness to try and work and ask valid questions. All of a sudden the employer goes, oh, we got a good one here. And then they want to pull you forward.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I think so trust isn't given, it's earned. And
Correct.
in order to earn the trust, you have to do something. You have to show something. And I think we a lot of times wait for the trust to be granted. So much like that, just like any kind of role or responsibility, if you are willing to put yourself in a position of, hey, I have something to offer you, I can do this thing, and treat the company as though it were your own. I don't have to own a company to feel like it's my company.
Right.
And once you have those glasses on, it becomes a lot more clearer of what you have in you that could impact the business.
And I think it makes you stand out. I mean, even if
Totally.
I worked in restaurants for a long, long time. But the fact is if you look at it and say, this is my workspace, and so I'm going to keep it clean or I'm going to keep it organized. Why? Not for the company, for me, because it's easier for me to do my job. But people notice that. And to your point earlier, which I don't want to let just flow by, the concept of leadership is not management. I look back, I do an exercise with when as I said, when I help people in job transition, I speak and I volunteer. And a lot of times there are people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who have been at a job for 10 or 12 years. And here they are, they're, out of a job. And how you found a job 10, 12 years ago is not the way you do it today. Completely. And they're going, what are you talking about? But my point to them was, and it's a good exercise even for you, because I think you'll get what I'm talking about. If you look back at all your jobs forever, forget all the way back, got rid of the title, forget what they called you, and just look at the job, either the responsibility or things that happen, there's probably a common thread in all of them. For
Yeah.
me, somehow I always ended up being responsible for a team or something, or people just followed me, or they, would say, well, Glenn, what do you think we should do? And I'm like, well, let's seat the room this way. Or I ended up in the kitchen organizing and expediting 300 orders, at a brunch. Just because they said, well, nobody else will do it, I'll do it, we'll figure it out. That was never something that was given to me. It just happened because I saw the need and said, well, we got to do this or else the team's going to fail. So that's just me. And I always understand that's just something that's innate in me. And so when I say that to people, all of a sudden they go, oh, well, I do this, I do that. I'm going, now when you talk about yourself, and someone asks you, tell me about what you do, you can explain it to somebody without a title. You can say, well, it always seems that I'm sort of this, and I do this, 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 this. And then the employer goes, well, I need that. Versus,
Yeah.
well, I was a manager, I was a VP, I was this, and the employer's going, what does that mean? Right? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I think the thing that a lot of human beings struggle with the most is breaking down their skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like my sister was recently in the job market, and I would bring up job opportunities and say, hey, this sounds like you. And she's like, no, I've never, I don't think that sounds like me. And then I would highlight certain fields. I'm like, have you done this? Have you done this?
Right.
And she would say yes, which really allowed me to kind of open my mind to exactly what you're saying. We do a really bad job of undervaluing the things that we have done in the past because they fell under a certain category or how some other business categorized them, instead of the actual responsibilities that we are good at, the skills that we are good at. So I completely agree. We have to do a better job of identifying those things to apply it to other positions and or even our own. Bringing in old skill sets that may not have been on paper or on your job description that you were
Sure.
given today, but then saying, this is something that I could also help with. This is
Sure.
something that I could actually do. And also raising your hand, not being shy to do that, and work out of, the box that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people when I hire them, I said, bring me all of your experience from your other jobs, right? Don't be afraid. Don't, because maybe you did something at your other job we could look at and apply and test and try, and maybe it's better for us. But to your point is that I think that allows people to talk about things when they're in front of their employers or their leaders in a way to offer skills or things to them. So when I do that exercise, we try to give an image, right? There was one woman who we did it with, and she was explaining, because she came to me and said, well, I used to work in a bank, and I used to work as a teacher, and I used to work in medical. How do I tie all those together? I said, talk to me about
Yes.
that thing. And she said, oh, well, I was the person who everybody relied on, my bosses relied on my hands and everything. And so I joked, I said, you're like an octopus. And she started laughing. And I said, that's what you say in the interview. And she goes, I can't say that. I said, yes, you can. That's what you can. And I said, write it on your LinkedIn profile. I said, but understand, when you say that, you have to say, So she would say, and she did it in an interview, and she got hired because she said, I'm the octopus. And the person picked their head up and looked. And she goes, the person who has their hands in everything, everybody relies on, everybody knows, I know what to do, I take care of everything. She goes, that's exactly what I need, versus the title. So I think, to your point, is when you're sitting there listening to needs of a team, don't be afraid just because you didn't have the title.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you don't have the skill, experience, opinion to test something. I think that's a huge thing for, what we've, one of the topics that we keep touching on here is knowing yourself, but how to explain it, how to share it, how to be willing to raise your hand and go, well, in my other job, we did this. I don't know if it totally applies. Then if you have a good leader, they're going to say, well, draw that up. Or do you have a copy of what it was? Well, I still have a copy. Let's look at that. And then all of a sudden you say, like, not really. Ooh, but I like that piece. We could take that piece. I think that's giving yourself permission to be at the table without the title. I think that...
Get out of your own way.
Giving yourself permission to feel that you can. And I think that's what's exciting also, just watching you from outside. Because I know I've seen you grow being in this environment, because it's allowed you to get out of your way. It's allowed you personally to be able to say, I know a lot more than people allowed me to share, or even I allowed myself to share, which is more important. And now all of a sudden you've surrounded yourself with advocates, you have good people, but also you have some people above you in your leaders there that are pulling you when you don't even think you can go. They're like, oh, yeah, Ken, come on, let's go.
Yeah. I think the greatest lesson for me is not just in an organization. It was also, social media, surrounding myself with like-minded peers, but then subscribing to the notions that were presented in front of me, and feeling like I wasn't loud enough or quiet enough or more, vocal in certain things, or I didn't have the same type of demeanor, so I had to be a certain way. And really allowing myself to say, no, I don't have to be what somebody else expects me to be. I can instead say, I'm really good at what I do, and here are the ways that I can do that. And I don't need to be someone else. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that that's easy, that I've now come to the light and it's all easy now. But it's a constant thing that I have to remind myself that it's okay to not fall under somebody else's characterization of what it means to, be successful, to be a leader, to be good at your job. And then just not subscribe to it, define it for yourself.
I think that is such a great way to sort of wrap up everything we've been talking about, because there is so much pressure on everyone based on social media or based on the perceptions. Even I look at it at times where I get that just worn down from everybody telling me how great they were. I tweeted something out the other day and I was like, I don't know if I should, but I was just frustrated. And I was sitting there and I was like, stop telling me how great you are. Stop telling me how hard you work. Stop telling me, just go get clients and run your business and be quiet, And that was just my frustration. But I'm been through a lot, and I still have to, my mind goes, you start to listen and then you go, no. So I just couldn't even imagine coming out of college, coming out of high school right now with the pressure on you. But I think what you're saying, and just trying to summarize some of these points, is, the more that you can surround yourself with people who are going to give you some good feedback, the more you're willing to do the work to understand what you like and what you don't like at this time. 5 years from now, it could change. You want title, you want money today, then you're going to have a family and you want this, or you want to travel, or I want to do. but the more that you can constantly be resetting, but there is a core underneath that drives you that is different than other people. As I said, I like dealing with teams. My brother doesn't. He does, and he'll admit that. He says, that's not my strength. He likes teams, but he doesn't like really building, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. That's why we work together well. So I think that, knowing yourself, and then as you move through your career, try to just remind yourself, take as much as I can out of each experience, be willing to work, be willing to learn, stop waiting for the title. And then over time, continue to trust yourself that just because you don't have a title doesn't mean that your opinion doesn't matter to the current situation in your company.
That is it. That is it. I mean, something that I've said a lot when people ask me these types of questions is a leader doesn't always have to be at the top. Change doesn't always have to start at the top. Is it so much easier? Yeah. But you can still be an agent of change at the very, very bottom of the totem pole. All it takes is that commitment and follow through and communication. And if you have those three things and you are consistent, you can absolutely influence change. You can create career paths and job titles and teams where none existed, even if you don't have an entrepreneurial environment. And I have done that in every single organization. So I wouldn't be preaching that if I haven't lived it. So I really recommend get out of your own way, see yourself as a leader, because a leader is not always a manager, but a leader is someone who provides a sense of direction, who is thinking about the big picture, who's thinking about the organization, and really just an effective problem solver. But you can't just come up with the idea and say, I'm an idea person, and then ignore everything else that comes from it. A lot of people believe themselves to be visionaries, but a true visionary can identify the steps on how to achieve it.
Wow. Boy, I hope you all are taking notes, and I hope you come back and watch this multiple times, because right there, I think these last few minutes have just been just crystal clear of what it is. And I hope it inspires you, because I got little goosebumps here, because that's just really, really good. So, Subi, I can't thank you enough. This was a lot of fun. We could be sitting here for hours chatting about this. So we'll have to come back and do this again.
Of course.
So, before we leave, just tell everybody where they can find you, how to connect with you, where you hang out on social media and things like that.
I am on Facebook, Subi Fernando Ghosh. I'm on Twitter at Subi101. I'm on Instagram. It's very easy to find me. It's SUBI. It's pretty much anywhere. I've tried to own as many of those assets as possible. Right. But Subi.Ghosh at Stream Companies, or honestly, I feel like I have grown a lot in the last 10 years and would never have seen it for myself. And it wouldn't have happened if people didn't freely invest in me. So if you're really struggling and you want it, I'd be happy to give you my cell number. It's 716-480-6135. You just have to take that first step.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, take her up on it. I do the same. I do the same thing. And it's amazing how many people feel that, well, we're just saying that for saying that. But at the same moment in time, I spend a couple hours every week talking to people who are not my clients, who are just picking my brains, or people I've met at conferences, or people who have watched the show and reach out and say, can I ask you a question? We're always available. That's the goal of this channel. That's why I bring people on who are going to try and help you. So
you've done that for me.
Oh God. So here's the thing, folks, if you made it this far, and I hope you have, please again, remind you to subscribe, click the button down below. Each week we share out some new videos. Again, please share these out. I think these types of videos, there's a lot of people out there who could use this information, use this help. So it's up to you to help share it. And as always, put in your comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So again, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But now Subi and I have given you a few more tools to help you be more successful. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.